Hello everyone, and welcome back to Realism Overhaul Sandbox in Kerbal Space Program 1.12, where I continue to test the Wedge Mars Lander that I introduced in the previous video. This is a Mars lander that is meant to fit in the space shuttle. It is a hydrolox lander, hydrogen and oxygen. It's fairly small, and it consists of two parts, an ascent module and a descent module, and it basically fills the entire space shuttle cargo bay. In the previous video, I discovered that the ascent module had too little delta V, and so I've increased the size of its tanks, and so it's heavier now. The descent module didn't need as much fuel, and so it's underfueled right now. I will probably make its tanks smaller overall, and we are seeing whether the space shuttle can get this modified version into orbit, which it will. That's not the hard part, actually. The hard part I will soon explain as we conclude orbit here. This is the Giulio shuttle, and it used Giulio KOS program in order to launch it. And then I have to get it into a full orbit. It leaves it suborbital at the end of the script. But that's no problem, we're in a decent orbit, and there you see the lander, which just occupies the whole thing. And getting it out. So the central portion is the ascent portion, the part that will bring the astronauts from the surface to orbit around Mars so they can return home. And then the two outer bits are the descent portion, which consists of a living space area and also a bay for a rover or something like that. So those are the two sides. And here I'm trying to figure out how to get the lander over to Mars. That's the hard part, because we have this lander, they don't have enough living space, so the logical thing to use would be ISS modules for the living space. So that's what I've got there. I've got a Unity/Harmony module and a Destiny module. And then once we have the living space, we need the propulsion to capture it around Mars, and then the propulsion to send it over to Mars. That's a lot of delta V. And then of course we also need the delta V to come back home to Earth. So that's three things. Altogether you're talking about at least 8,000 meters per second, and it's not so easy to get that when you've got that lander plus the living space, and I've totally forgotten about the supplies. Now, if you had a large launch vehicle capable of a large payload capacity, that wouldn't be so much of a problem, but I'm trying to do this with the space shuttle in space shuttle sized chunks. Here I'm also deciding to use some pulsed inductive thrusters, I think they were, as my electric thrusters. Those use oxygen, and then I've got the nuclear engine at the center that is currently a NASA NTP style engine, so fairly low thrust, basically NERVA style stats, but smaller, 111 kilonewtons. So we've got that nuclear engine using the hydrogen, and then we've got the little ion-ish thrusters using oxygen, and then we want a hydrolox stage to help push us out initially. So mainly the electric engine plus the nuclear engine are supposed to help us capture around Mars and then get back, but they'll need to help us get there too, because the hydrolox stage just doesn't have enough oomph even if you have a bunch of segments to it. I set that aside for now since I forgot about the supplies and I would have to redo it all, and I decided instead to test the entry into Mars' atmosphere and the landing with this, since that's important and we might need to make changes to this in order to fix it for that purpose. So best to do that first before we construct everything else anyway. But I got a sense of how many launches we would need in order to make it all happen. Oh, I've got a plume problem there. Those look like the stock plumes that are sort of hanging out for some reason. But yeah, it still would be fewer launches than it would take for me to get the Starship over to Mars. But of course, Starship could potentially carry more payload capacity than this. So there is that. And once we put a rover in, that's a whole other thing that we will have to be carrying with this. So that should be taken into account as well. Probably, as far as supplies are concerned, we should have something else being sent with the surface habitat and supplies. this doesn't have enough supplies on its own for them to stay there for the full time, usually close to 2 years on the surface. So we probably need to send all that separately, and that will cut down on the supplies I need on the ship going there. The ship going there will need about a year and a half. Anyway, as you can see, it's tumbling out of control because of the aerodynamics. Mars's atmosphere, as usual, too weak to help us out at all, but strong enough to cause problems like this. It's the universe's worst atmosphere. Well, anyway, I wanted to check whether the parachutes were properly assigned and to arm them at the appropriate time, but it's too fast for them to come out right now, so that's not going to happen. Not that they would have enough time to slow us down anyway. We generally need to be below 1800 meters per second for even the drogue chutes to come out. But 1% of Earth's atmosphere. Can we handle it? No. But I haven't configured those flaps that pop out to be air brakes or any other control surfaces. They really should be configured as control surfaces, but that's really hard because, you know, I need them to animate and be placed properly. They can't just be placed anywhere. As we ricocheted off the ground, and the parachute's actually deployed after we ricocheted off the ground, but them deploying has not slowed down our wild rotation. And we crash into the surface, and all that survives are the parachute cases. Good job, parachutes. Anyway, so I decided to put air brakes. And one other thing is we want the center of lift to, or center of pressure, or whatever you want to call it, to be behind the center of mass. And with the flaps the way they are deployed, they're probably pulling the center of lift forward, which is not what we want. So maybe I'll have to have them tilt back a bit and change the animation, but then maybe I should just configure them as air brakes themselves. The air brakes are actuating there, as you can see. Will this help? Well, for a while it sort of does, but ultimately we see the yaw maxing out, and then the pitch maxes out, and it goes out of control. Ironically, just after the dramatic music would indicate that it should go out of control. Off it goes. So this was all done during live streams, and that's why I have the music going. As usual, if I have the music, that's a good sign that I did it during a live stream. Interestingly, it sort of orients itself in a way. It sort of nose first, but that's not the way we want. We want to be able to use the descent engines at the bottom, which we cannot right now. I don't know if this nose first or more sideways, but it's definitely liking this orientation quite a lot. But it's not a helpful one. Anyway, as it meets its demise, obviously we have more problems, but I wonder how they intended to keep balance with the Constellation Mars Lander, because it arguably would be in a worse position than this. But I will contemplate this and come back to you with possible solutions. With that, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.